Hey everyone, so patch 5.1 just came out this week, and it's gotten not really mixed reviews, kind of mixed reviews maybe, but pretty mostly consistent reviews. A lot of people, which is that a lot of people just plain old don't like the patch very much at all. Though there are some good things, a lot of people felt that it looked like it was going to be pretty good, fairly good, coming down the pipelines the last 2 months that it's been in development. But then once it actually hit us, the actual changes that were made were some of them had negative consequences that people weren't expecting, and really the initial impact seems just made the PvP game worse off. And a lot of people are pissed, and not including me. But I'm gonna try to make a fair assessment and kind of try to see the reasoning behind some of the changes made and what their impacts are gonna be on the future of PvP in the game. This is just going to be going over the general changes. I'll go over shamans and I think the future of enhancement in probably my next video, or a quick one. This is just going to be overall stuff. So the first thing is the gear upgrade system, being able to use excess conquest and valor points after you've gotten a full set of gear on upgrading your gear pretty slowly. And I think it was a great idea for honor gear and what else, the justice point gear, but in PvP for the max level items, most PvPers think it's a terrible idea and do not want to have to deal with leveling up an item set all the way until the end of a season, really, and possibly not even catching up to the players who have the best gear at all. Because it's going to take us another probably almost double, not quite double, but almost double the amount of conquest points to get the gear. It'll take us almost as much as that to fully upgrade the rest of it. Well, not quite as much, probably about 75%. And really, I'm not looking forward at all to having to grind more gear on my main, and especially not on alt. It's already a pain in the ass just to keep up with the gear item level. Keep up with your gear throughout the beginning of the first half of the season. So the last half, we want to be just more relaxed. We want to be able to focus on the actual game instead of the gear, because people who play the game now have been playing the game long enough, especially the good PvPers. If you're good enough to have your gear fairly early on, you've probably been playing the game long enough that you don't play the game for the gear accumulation. That's really not, especially because the gear is just, there's nothing, it's all relative. There's nothing special about the gear that you get. It's all standardized. It all has the same stats. You can fiddle around with the Reforged system, which is awesome, which is, I love, that was I think the only good change in Cataclysm was the Reforged system. But beyond that, you don't want to, no one really finds fun the gear accumulation, especially when it's all just the same stuff. It's nothing's unique, and it just gives you more stats. PvPers want to have a more level playing field when they compete against other players, because that's why one of the appealing things of competing with other players, having a fair level, even playing field, and who can come up with the best strategy or tactics, and who has the quicker reaction time, the most skill, all of that. You don't want to have a match based on who spent the most time in the last 4 months, 3 months, just accumulating the gear and getting the higher item level. Because whenever you win or lose an arena match, you don't want it to be just based on, or heavily based on, whether or not you have equal gear, you outgeared them, or you were outgeared. It's just crap feeling, and it was not a crap feeling, but it's not fun at all, because people don't play the game to get the gear, period. People don't PvP to get the gear at all. And that was a gross misunderstanding by the developers at Blizzard. They probably did it just to maybe keep people subscribed and playing, but I think it's going to have the opposite effect, because it's just going to turn people off, because we don't want to spend every week, we don't want to have to grind all the gear out and just be obsessing with staying on top to stay competitive with the other higher ranking players. And if you're low or you're trying to get an ult, then it's unquestionably a bad thing to be, you know, behind gear. It's not fun at all, and you just get stomped. There's no reason to keep playing at some point if you're so far behind. So beyond the gear upgrading system, the class changes. Most people, I think, can agree that most of the changes to classes for PvP balance were good. There were some things like nerf to Windwalker, or nerf to monks, not Windwalker, but Mistweaver monks and shamans that a lot of people just kind of disagreed with because they didn't think they were necessary or had some negative effects to other secondary players or classes. I think the Mistweaver changes were done for PvE, and they're probably gonna hurt PvP a lot. But most of them, I think, for the most part, were pretty good. But what seems to have a lot of people unexpectedly upset right now is the PvP power boost to weapons that greatly, massively increase the damage done right now in player versus player. Well, mostly just for the people who actually had the tier 2 weapons. Somewhat for the tier 1 weapons as well, though. But the PvP power boost to weapons, I think I understand why they did it. Because certain classes were just impossible or too difficult to kill, especially when they stacked full resilience gems. You know, warriors this entire time mostly have just been stacking PvP power gems, and shadow priests were just stacking power gems, and even then they were really hard to kill. But especially when they stacked full resilience, they'd become impossible. Really, for most people, for most classes, they'd become impossible or near impossible. So now we're seeing, especially with the hybrid PvP power nerf, is that more classes are stacking the full resilience, and now it's become totally clear that resilience for some classes will definitely or can definitely make them too hard to kill, because even with the added PvP power to weapons, classes like warriors, shadow priests, ferals, Death Knights sitting in blood presence are all particularly tough. Mages, frost mages, or all mages, are really insanely tough to kill while they're stacking resilience. But the problem is, though, so most classes had the room to actually start stacking the resilience instead of the PvP power gems, because they were already stacking power in the first place, so they could make up for the loss, or they can make up for the increased damage that's out there by just simply stacking more resilience. But the problem is that some classes or specs already had to be stacking resilience gems, some or all resilience gems, in order to be viable. Like DPS shamans and retribution paladins in particular, they already had to stack resilience to be at all viable. So they used up any kind of cushion that they might have had available to compensate for the increased damage out there, because gemming full resilience compared to gemming no resilience, or almost no resilience, or gemming almost full resilience, the difference is like more than 20%. I don't know what exactly, but it was like 23% the difference between stacking no resilience and full resilience gems, and that is a massive difference. I think it's even more than that, maybe 25% or something like that. But a lot of people were complaining that it was still really difficult to kill players in battlegrounds quick enough, like it was in Cataclysm, and so the more power could be seen as a step towards, you know, a good thing, towards more player deaths more often to make the game kind of more exciting and interesting. But it is weird that they just threw it all on the weapons that most players don't have access to, or at least the tier 2 weapons. The tier 1 weapons still have some, but it's mostly on the tier 2 weapons. And there was no change to the armor too, so a lot of players just don't have any kind of access to it. So it is a problem, the resilience gem stacking, or the discrepancy between some players stacking them and some players not. Because in 3v3 arenas, you don't want the game to be about guessing who's stacking more resilience than the other player, because the difference in survivability is so big it's huge if you guess wrong. If you decide to train one guy or decide to swap to one guy instead of another, you can really screw yourself just because you don't know whether or not they're actually super tough or not, or they're just doing a ton of damage because they have a lot of the power gems. And having the PvP power gems and resilience gems makes gemming boring. It's either that's all you have to choose between, power or resilience. And sometimes healers may stack some stamina, and then that's it. That's all you have to choose between. It's not, I think, in my opinion, the secondary stats, the main stat, or stacking stamina perhaps is a lot more interesting than, power. Do I want to do more damage or healing, or do I want to reduce more damage taken? So what I think needs to happen is they just need to remove PvP power and resilience gems, and the gear needs to be more standardized to make these huge swings in survivability not as possible, to really just to standardize the game, standardize the gear, because the guessing game is bad, and just gemming resilience is boring. They'll actually be able to balance damage and survivability, I think, much better too. They just standardize all the gear, just allow stamina, secondary stats, or primary stat for gems, and to increase the resilience on all the gear, standardize it appropriately, and then increase the survivability of whatever classes, increase or decrease the survivability of whatever classes need it to happen, need it to be tweaked. That, or maybe reduce the effectiveness a little bit of resilience and resilience gems and power gems. Really, them not making changes for the sake of keeping PvE the same is really screwing PvP over really hard. And I wish they'd get more creative. If they want to do that, if they want to maintain the PvE statuses, then they just need to get more creative in how they make their changes to also give PvP some kind of semblance of balance and fun for as many classes as they can. But another thing that I don't like at all is the slow pace. It changes how long it took for the patch to come out. Because of the PvP power change, all the classes that were meant to be nerfed are even stronger now than they were before. So it was already extremely disappointing that we had to wait this long for the first sizable round of balance changes. But then it was devastating that the changes turned out to be all for nothing when the classes that were already strong are even stronger. Like, that's definite from my experience, and really just I'm not sure looking at the ladders, but warlocks, mages, demo warlocks, mages, warriors, what else? Pharaohs, shadow priests. They're all as strong, if not stronger than they were before the patch. Most of them are stronger than they were before the patch comparatively. But I think it was the very day or the day before the patch came out that a hotfix patch was released also that contained some PvP balance changes, class balance changes. But since then, the announcement was removed from the front page and it was rolled into the 5.1 patch notes. But the hotfix had some of the changes, like the vanish cooldown being reduced to 2 minutes, and the changes to warlocks, enfeeblement, curse, and the auras, the demolocks auras. So when something like that happens, it baffles me that they don't have or can't have balance changes come out sooner, like every Tuesday. Especially because we know by now that they don't actually get any PvP balance testing done on these PTRs. Like, none. Because I remember seeing for years now that once a balance change is announced on the PTR, seemingly, that's specifically geared for PvP, seemingly like 95% of the time it goes through unchanged. And even if it's been in the PTR for a month or so, or weeks. And so it usually only changes if there's some sort of outcry against it, like the reverted 3-second cooldown on the Pyroblast. So we know that they can be coming out with changes more often. And we know that they get their balance feedback from the live servers, mostly, partly because of the shambles that the release balance was in. They had a year to balance Mists of Pandaria PvP, and they seem not to have paid much attention to it at all. Or not that's not true. That's not being very fair to them. But it did still turned out to be pretty bad. And there was, you hear things about, or you know things that problems that existed for months and months and weren't even touched or weren't even looked at, and still came with a release of the game, which is inexcusable, But it's pretty clear that the testing happens on the live servers when people are actually trying to get rating. They're playing their classes to the tip top. They're getting their gear. They're getting their arena rating, and they're being more vocal about it, being more vocal about what the changes they think need to be made and the imbalances that they think there are. So what they need to do is just every Tuesday come out with their changes that they've vetted and that they vetted at least somewhat with some kind of internal testing or something, or short PTRs, or just some constant PTR server that they constantly update with pre-changes. So the last thing I want to talk about is the hybrid healing nerf. To put it short and sweet, very sweet, this has to be one of the dumbest, most short-sighted changes I've yet seen in the history of WoW. Though that's probably not fair to the other dumb and short-sighted changes I've seen taking place. Because over the years, the development team has really proven to be notoriously unable to foresee the consequences of the changes that they make. Because this wasn't just a change to reduce hybrid healing now. Like, forget, that it was just a blanket change. Well, I guess you can't really detach that it was just a blanket nerf to all hybrids, that even to ones that didn't need the nerf. That was really bad of it. That makes it lazy and really inexcusably, lazy and bad, and just lack of effort. But also, what makes it even worse is that it's going to hurt really bad in the long run, because it's going to screw the scaling between item levels, or between season to season. It's going to screw, as item levels increase, the balancing and the scaling of hybrid effectiveness, total effectiveness from season to season. Because it's going to ensure that pure spec damage and dedicated healing are both going to scale exponentially, because they both benefit from the additional PvP power multiplier. But hybrid healing is only going to scale linearly, or more linearly than pure damage or dedicated healers. And what it's going to do, it's going to cause the effectiveness of hybrids to fall further and further behind over time as gear gets stronger, because it's simply not going to scale as well as the damage and dedicated healing. So what we're going to see is all hybrids are going to get weaker over the long run. And one of the first videos that I made when I started this channel, I think it was called PvP versus PvE in Mists of Pandaria. I made it 3 months ago. It was pretty late. It was made pretty late, but I tried to warn Blizzard to get their scaling done, to get their scaling right the first season, or as soon as they could, so that as item levels increase and you go from season to season, the balance between classes doesn't shift so dramatically. And this change fucks that idea so hard, because it's the exact opposite of maintaining steady scaling between, or consistent scaling between all classes, because it de facto it's simple 8th grade, 7th grade algebra, that hybrids are not gonna, since hybrids don't benefit from this extra stat, they're not gonna scale as well as other classes are. Their effectiveness isn't going to scale as well. So we're definitely going to see them, fall behind. And they're just going to get weaker and weaker as gear gets better. And this changes like this, stuff like this kind of short-sighted, really, I hate to be mean, but you can't, it's really hard not to get pissed off. But this idiotic change that was made, instead of doing the nerfs where the nerfs needed to be done and where the nerfs were called for, that most people knew about, is mostly, Shadow Priests whose hybrid healing was kind of over the top and whose survivability was over top. Maybe you can throw in Ferals to that. What else? Like Boomkins, Boomkins might have had some heals, but in terms of balance, they weren't doing too well. They hadn't been doing too well. So I think some were doing okay, but for the most part, they weren't doing very well at all. And, this change, like I said, really just totally screwed DPS shamans and paladins. Who else? What other hybrids are there? Oh, monks probably too. Windwalker monks. But yeah, that's kind of it. I guess it was kind of a rant. There were some good things about the patch, but a lot of it was just overshadowed, and it seems to just turn out worse. It really, that's what's the worst part of it. It seems like balance and in the game just came out worse than it was before the patch, and that's after waiting 2 months. But I'm going to go into more shaman specific stuff in another video. I just had to get all this off my chest. So thanks for listening. I'll talk to you guys later. Oh yeah, Sneaky Shaman 2, Sneaky Shaman Chapter 2 will come out soonish. I'm working on that, the Sneaky Shaman. So a lot of people like the first one. I got a lot of requests for another one. So I'll do something like that. I should do more unique stuff like that too, but that's going to come out sometime soon. So thanks for listening, watching, and I'll talk to you guys next time.